Welcome to CivilNet. Who are the Armenian-Americans? How do they preserve and perpetuate their culture and their traditions? Stephanie Ayanyan, a filmmaker, a producer, director, partner at Story Shop Films in Philadelphia, wants to tell their story. Take a look.
We are going to follow 5 Armenian families across the United States. We have 4 generations or more of Armenian-Americans, children that are continuing to speak the language, learning the customs, cooking in the kitchen with their parents. They are going into the communities and sharing their culture with non-Armenians. These are elements of culture that, because they're thriving, I believe should be celebrated.
Stephanie, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
When we talked to each other via Facebook, I got to know about your project, and we get a lot of requests. There's a lot of really good projects that are crowdfunding through Kickstarter and Indiegogo and other sort of crowdfunding websites. And then we sort of have to pick and choose the stories we want to tell. Your story was really compelling. It wants to tell the story of the Armenian-Americans ahead of the centenary, the 100th anniversary of the Armenian Genocide. Tell me, if you will, what inspired you to embark on this, what may appear a very challenging journey?
Thank you. Yes, it will be challenging, but that's one of the things I love about making films. The reason that I was motivated to make this film is last year in April, I was sitting in my living room and I thought someone should be making a film about where we are 100 years later. And we should celebrate the fact that we still stand and we are strong and we are powerful and we have made these communities around the world. So I started to look into if there were other films out there being made. And there are some films being made, but one thing I wanted to do was to really share this with the public, especially in America, because that's where I live. And so I thought, what's the best story to tell? And I thought was best to tell the story of Armenian-Americans 100 years after the genocide, go into their families and see what they're doing to continue to perpetuate the culture.
Right. You intend on going to different cities around the United States to meet with these families, and certainly the Armenian-American experience is really unique. There were Armenians coming to the United States, after the 1890s, during the massacres, and then even before the genocide. And some of the stories, how these people had to work and live and survive. And 100 years later, still sort of hanging on with every sort of ounce of energy they have to their culture. And why do you think it's so important for Armenians? They could have assimilated, become part of the mainstream, perhaps lived more comfortable lives, who knows?
I absolutely hear you. And I think that what I have experienced as a third-generation Armenian-American is that it's our responsibility as Armenians to survive and thrive and continue to put forward the culture, because if we don't, it will die out. And so if we are proud and if we are intelligent, we must continue to share that with the world, because there aren't that many Armenians left. And I'm fortunate that I was able to actually meet an Armenian and marry him, and we have Armenian children, but that is not always the case. And even the people that don't marry Armenians are still raising their children with the Armenian culture. In America, everyone faces assimilation, but one of the things that I think ties our communities together is this concept of we are survivors, and we are traumatized by what happened to our people, and we will continue to come together and create these communities whenever we meet other Armenians.
Sure. Talk to me about the campaign. So when I first went to the site, and for our viewers, we will be providing the link to the Kickstarter site for your film, you were asking for $45,000. This morning, when I went on again to see how much you had actually raised, I was very pleasantly surprised to see that you had gone over your potential. It was now $50,000 raised. How does that make you feel?
It's awesome. It's awesome because the reason we wanted to do this was to show the support of the community, and we have people donating from other countries and pledging from all over the United States, and there are businesses and organizations and individuals that are coming together to show that they want this to happen. And it's awesome.
It also shows the power of mobilization, of solidarity, of how we sort of stick together, because oftentimes we complain and we gripe that as Armenians we don't support one another, but then we see initiatives like this and it's quite mind-blowing, isn't it?
It really is, and it's a powerful and wonderful thing to be a part of.
Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about the specifics now, if we may. So now that you've raised the funds, you're gonna be traveling throughout the United States, but is $50,000 enough for you to actually make a 1-hour documentary?
It's a great question. So the $50,000 and whatever we raise in the next few days before it closes, the money will be used as seed funding to develop the project, which means that we're going to be able to use that money to go out and start to do more research on which stories we're going to follow, which 5 families we're going to follow in their daily lives, which individuals we really need to speak to and see them perpetuating the culture. Then we will also be meeting with major foundations because to make an hour-long film for television distribution, this is a large undertaking, and $50,000 isn't enough to do it. So we're going to need, in all honesty, it's going to be about $500,000 for an hour-long film. That's not as much as it often costs. So we're going to foundations to seek major gifts to be able to do the television broadcast piece and the major outreach initiative also.
Okay, and when do you hope to have the film ready?
We hope to have it ready in the fall or winter of 2015. And the reason that we plan on showing it, broadcasting it at that time, is because April around the world is going to be major events already happening, and we actually want to film at some of those events in the United States. And so if we actually have something that comes out in fall or winter of 2015, we'll be able to bring up the Armenian culture back into public consciousness and have events around the broadcast and community events, and people come together around this to really continue to raise awareness about our people, our past, and our future.
And talking about future, just as a final question, Stephanie, in the diaspora as Armenians, our identity is wrapped up in genocide. Every time we meet a non-Armenian, the first thing we tell them is that, you know, we were victims of the first genocide of the 20th century. April 2015 is going to be Armenia's year, the Armenian nation's year. I think global attention will be sort of on the issue of the genocide. Now, 100 years later, as we enter the next 100 years, should we change the narrative? Should we say that it is now going to be Armenia's century as opposed to Armenians as victims?
That's a tough question. You know, I think that artists and scholars and individuals and organizations will be weighing in on that. And that's not something that I can answer. But I think that it's an important thing to consider. I think that no matter what, we will all still inside know that we are these survivors and that we do live with this trauma of what happened to our ancestors. And so I think that it's something where we have to determine what is the best way to move forward. And there are a lot of groups that are, you know, working hard every minute of every day to get recognition for the Armenian people.
Right. Well, it's about discussing these kinds of issues in a public forum, in conferences and symposiums, through making films and writing books. So Stephanie Ayanyan, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
I'd like to remind our viewers that my guest was Stephanie Ayanyan from Philadelphia. Stay with CivilNet.